At Computex 2024, Phanteks had a really interesting case for us to check out. It was called the Phanteks Evolv X2, and it's finally here. This is a bit of a different take on the classic fish tank style case. So let's do our usual thing. Let's take a closer look, and I'll let you guys know if this is worth $149 US. Let's jump in. Let's start off by removing the top panel. There's a little notch on the back edge of the case. You want to put your thumbs in that, then push the panel up so you can lift the top panel away from the case. Now, to get into the case, this does need to happen first. There's no way around it. Now, on the top of the case, you'll notice there are two screws. There's one on each side. These both need to be removed to remove the side panels. So we start off with the front side panel. Basically, you want to put your fingers on the edge of that TG panel, and then you pull the top away, and then you can pull that whole thing away from the case. The back side is much the same, removing that top screw, and then you'll want to unclip the top and then angle it and lift it away from the case. There's also the side panel, which you can squeeze. This is a removable metal side panel for cable management. When you release the clip, it's a hinge door. You'll want to open up the hinge and then lift it off the pegs that hold that whole metal panel into place. Then, removing the front panel, you'll want to remove this panel here on the basement of the case. Basically, you just tilt it towards you. There's a screw behind the panel and then a screw at the top of the case. You want to remove both of those screws, then slide the panel to the right, and then you can lift that away from the case. Now, it's not necessary to remove the front panel, but as you can see, it can be done. The whole top panel is a dust filter, but it's not removable from the top panel. I guess they did this because you can just take the whole top panel off the case. And then there's another dust filter on the bottom edge of the case, which slides out through the front of the case. And this one can be fully removed from the case. As for power supplies, the Evolv X2 supports power supplies with a maximum length of up to 250 millimeters. And I use this huge power supply just so you can get an idea of what that would look like. For storage, there's a removable drive sled on the back of the motherboard tray with a single captive thumb screw. And on here, you can do up to 3 2.5-inch drives in total. There's also another set of drive sleds which are behind that plastic panel to remove the front panel. And yeah, this is just a removable hard drive cage. You can do a drive on the inside of the cage and also on the top of the cage. So plenty of storage options for the X2. With cable management in the X2, there's lots of cable tie down points everywhere. There's lots of cable pass-throughs to run everything nice and clean. It also has back connector support, which we'll come back to in a moment. But the real thing here is it doesn't really matter too much because even though it does have great cable management, with the panel that we removed earlier, you don't really need to worry too much about it. But as you can see, it has plenty of places to tie stuff down, to run cables, and overall pretty decent cable management. There's also a rubber grommet on the edge of the board as well, which will help hide some additional cables. And this is nice if you're not using a back connector board. As well as that, we see what we've seen with lots of cases recently. It also has external cable management for all of your plugs. Now, to remove the top panel, there's a single thumb screw, which will allow us to remove the bracket to install a radiator up top. This bracket will allow us to install up to 3 120mm fans up the top or up to a 360mm liquid cooler or radiator. This case is more geared towards AIOs rather than custom water cooling. There's a thumb screw on the bottom of the case which can be completely removed, and then you can pull that bottom fan bracket away from the case to install fans on the bottom. And this bracket here will allow you to install up to 3 120mm fans. It's got a recessed fitment, so most fans up to about 30mm should sit relatively flush in the X2 on the bottom of the case here. And finally, on the rear of the case, there's a single 120mm fan mount. As for motherboard support, the X2 will support motherboards from ITX up to ATX, and it also will support back connector motherboards. I thought it was a good idea to show you how this would look with this Aura Stealth board. and I think it looks pretty interesting with a back connector board, but as you'll see with the build, we didn't use one. As for air cooling support, if you're going to use a tower cooler, you've got a maximum clearance of 170 millimeters. To install GPUs in the X2, you need to remove this plastic bracket, and that will allow you to remove the slot covers. Now, the X2 will support GPUs up to 380 millimeters in length. As you can see here, this is the brand new NVIDIA GeForce RTX 5090 Founders Edition, and it fits in there with no issue. It's actually not a really big GPU as it is. As for vertical GPU mounting options, you can use a vertical GPU bracket if you'd like to vertically mount your GPU in this case as well. Be aware, if you're using a 50 series card, you will need to use a PCIe Gen 5 riser cable. The Evolv X2 also has an integrated GPU support bracket that can be configured in many different locations by changing the screw offsets on the installed bracket. As for wiring an I/O, we've got a front panel connector for all the lights and all the switches, USB Type-C front panel, USB Type-A, we've got front panel audio, as well as the RGB cables for the integrated RGB inside the case, which I'll show in just a moment. This can also be used with the Nextlink hub that Phanteks makes as well, if that's what you wanted to do. On the top panel of the case, we've got a power button and a reset button. On the lower corner of the X2, we've got a headphone/combined microphone jack, as well as two USB Type-A ports and a USB Type-C port. As mentioned, there is integrated RGB. It uses some pogo pins for the top panel, and there's an RGB strip on the edge in line with the power and reset buttons on that top panel. This is a little bit of an example of the other RGB in the case, but it's not over the top and it's pretty clean. That's everything I think you need to know about the Phanteks Evolv X2 for now. Let's do our usual thing. Let's do a build. We'll talk about thermals and all that jazz after this. As far as the thermals with the X2, it's not terrible. This case is designed to be a chimney layout case, so what it's doing is it's pulling all the air in from the bottom of the case and it's exhausting it all through the top of the case. Now, I spoke to Phanteks while at CES, even though they didn't have a presence there. I spoke to the guys at Phanteks and they basically said, What they ended up doing was a lot of research into how it pulls the air in from the bottom of the case. And they said with the height that they've created at the bottom of the case, it makes it absolutely perfect and kind of in line with some of their other cases in terms of airflow performance. And you can see here, this is a 9950X and it doesn't get super hot. As well as that, the GPU thermals here are fantastic. So I would say that if you're looking at building a system with similar specs to this, and this may also be our last 40 series video because 50 series is so close that, yeah, I think the thermals are going to be just fine here. Let us know what you guys think of this, and if you're interested in any of the hardware, there's a PC part picker list down below in the description. Now, let's talk a little bit about the build quality of the X2. What I gotta say about this is it's very different from what we typically see from Phanteks. There's been a lot of attention to detail in terms of cable management, especially with other little things like tube routing when you're mounting a liquid cooler at the top. The recommended way to do it for the X2 is to have the tubes at the back of the case. There is a cutout on the top of the chassis that allows tube routing, which makes it look the way it does, so that's why it's so clean. Also, mounting the radiator on top of that top frame bracket is the recommended way to do that as well. With saying all that, the materials are really, really nice. I think the fit and finish is quite good too. And if you look at this clip here, cable management doesn't really matter because you've got that massive metal swinging hinge door on the back that hides everything. But the fact that there still is nice cable management underneath all of that is nice too. The design of this case is really geared towards those back connected motherboards. Even though you can use normal ones, you can see that they really thought about hiding absolutely everything in this case. Now, if I had a black back connector motherboard and a Asus GPU with the BTF power connector on it as well, this would have looked absolutely insane. I mean, it still looks freaking cool. That's the thing with this case, right? It's very functional, it's very clean, and this is one of those cases that just looks very unique. It looks like your hardware is floating, and I really like that. Yeah, I really don't have anything bad to say about this case other than it is quite tall. Now, I'm not a tall person by any stretch of the imagination, but even with this standing on the desk, it's like almost as tall as me. I mean, it's kind of hard to gauge this, to be honest, because of like the angle that this is filmed in and whatnot. But yeah, that's my only thing, is it is a bit tall for what it is, but the footprint itself is nice. So I think you guys will probably like this. This is a very different type of case from Phanteks. And we've seen like the NV5, the NV7, the NV9. That's a more familiar type of fish tank. This here has something that I was predicting that we'd see more of in 2024 and 2025, and that is recessed fans. So all the fans being flush so you can't see them. And I just like that type of design and the clean aesthetic, which is why I didn't go complete RGB or anything like that, because I feel like with the lines of the case, it should speak for itself without overdoing lighting and RGB and that kind of stuff. But let me know what you guys think about the X2, because if you're interested in it, it's starting at $149 US. Again, I really don't have anything bad to say about this case. I'm impressed. I really like it. I liked it when I saw the first concepts of it at Computex last year, and having it here in person, it's a great looking case. Yeah, I think Phanteks has done a pretty good job here, and I don't think the price is insane because the build quality is really, really nice. Again, let us know your thoughts. I think they nailed it. This is a good first case review for the year. Good way to start the year. I don't know, let me know. I don't care, whatever. Computer cases, huh? It's a good one. You'll like it.